The 1970s. When I think of the 70s, I think of British Leyland, moustaches, sideburns, the colour brown, the oil crisis, and the recession. Now, my first video on this channel was my favourite cars of the 1980s, where I listed the years of the 80s, giving my favourite car for each one. This video is going to be in the same format. I'll tell you my favourite car from each year of the 70s, along with an explanation why. Anyway, enough waffle, let's get into the video. The 1970 slot was quite hard to fill. Some great cars came out. I'm talking Triumph Stag, De Tomaso Pantera, Opel Manta, Range Rover Classic. However, my favourite car from 1970 was the Mark III Ford Cortina. Specifically, the GXL variant. That would be my trim level of choice. Now, why have I put this car on the list? Well, it's my favourite Ford Cortina. In my opinion, it's the best looking Ford Cortina. It has Coke bottle styling, which is the type of styling when a car has a narrow centre surrounded by flaring fenders, and it looks slightly similar to a classic glass Coke bottle. It had some design elements from American Fords of the time, such as the 1969 Mercury Montego. The grille and headlights seem to be clearly inspired by the Montegos. Another thing which I love about the way the Cortina looks is the chrome strips on the grille and the chrome bumpers. The interior in the GXL looks absolutely amazing. It's full of wood and leather, and I really like the dials. As much as I love digital dashboards, I really do like the way dials look. Even though the Mark III looked big and American, it was the same length as the previous Mark II Cortina. However, it was 4 inches wider. I must say I prefer the earlier Mark III Cortinas, as I like dual round headlights, whereas in 1973, I think it was, they were updated and facelifted to have square headlights. Again, some decent cars came out in 1971, but my favourite car of that year is the Morris Marino. It's the Maserati Bora. At a close second is the Rolls-Royce Corniche. Anyway, Maserati proposed a concept of a mid-engined two-seater sports car in 1968. De Tomaso and Lamborghini already had mid-engine two-seater sports cars in their lineup, and Maserati wanted to compete. They had a working prototype by 1969, and in 1971 the car entered production. The Bora had a 4.7 litre or 4.9 litre V8 and a 5-speed manual transmission. The 4.9 litre had about 320 horsepower and 335 pound-feet of torque, with a top speed of 177 miles per hour. The 4.7 litre had a top speed of about 168. The Bora stayed into production until 1978. And 564 were produced. 1972 was very hard. 1972 was a good year for cars. And to be quite honest, I think I have more than one favourite car of that year. But I have chosen this car because of what it would go on to become. I have chosen the Mark I Honda Civic. The first generation Honda Civic was one of Honda's first cars to be sold in Britain. And over in the States, its small size meant that it can easily outperform the Ford Pinto and Chevrolet Vega. And with the oil crisis in 1973, the economical little Civic sold like face masks in a global pandemic. The regular Civic had around 50-60 horsepower. However, there was a Civic RS 1200, which was introduced in 1974, at about 75 horsepower and 74 pound-feet of torque. It had stiffer dampers and suspension, which gave it better handling. Production lasted for about a year, and 20,000 Civic RSs were produced. In 1979, it was replaced by the Generation 2 Honda Civic. Right, 1973, the oil crisis happened, and some decent cars and the Austin Allegro were released. My favourite car, which was unveiled in 1973, is the Triumph Dolomite Sprint. In 1972, cars such as the BMW 2002 were outselling the Dolomite, so Triumph introduced the Dolomite Sprint, a new sports version for the range. The car had around 127 brake horsepower and 121 pound-feet of torque, and a top speed of 116 miles per hour. The Dolomite came with alloy wheels as standard, which was the first British car to do so. It also came with a vinyl roof, a front spoiler, tinted glass, and from 1975 onwards, overdrive. The car was priced well compared to its competitors, and the press loved it. So, why have I chosen this car as my favourite car from 1973? Because it is a great looking car in my opinion, and it may not be the fastest, but it definitely has a spot somewhere in my dream car garage. 1794, no cars were released then. 1974, however, some amazing cars were released. Again, this was very hard, and I definitely have more than one favourite from this year. These cars are the Lamborghini Countach, the Volkswagen, I'm Sean Conway now, the Volkswagen Scirocco, and the Volkswagen Golf. I really could not decide for this one, so here's three. So, the reasons why I love these cars. Well, the Volkswagen Golf is a legendary car. The Volkswagen Scirocco is brilliant, and the Lamborghini Countach is, well, the Lamborghini Countach. Is this a bit cheaty, including more than one car in one slot? I don't know, and to be honest, I don't care. It's my video, not yours. I do what I want. 1975, the year, not the band. My favourite car from this year is the Jaguar XJS. The XJS was a successor to the legendary E-Type. It debuted in 1975 with a 5.3 litre V12 engine, the perfect car for just after an oil crisis. It had a top speed of 143 miles per hour and went from 0 to 60 in 7.6 seconds. The British police used the XJS during the 70s and early 80s. The XJS stayed in production for over 20 years, until 1996. Obviously, the XJS received various updates and changes throughout its lifespan, including a high-performance Lister XJS. If you are sitting there wondering what the hell I'm going on about, and you have no idea what Lister is, I made a video on it. I'll link it somewhere in the corner or down in the description below. The Jaguar XJS may not be the most reliable car in the world. It may not be the best looking car in the world, but I want one, and I don't know why. I just want one. 1976, the Lotus Esprit, Rover SD1, Ford Fiesta. I love them all. However, the Esprit has taken the biscuit, but only by an itsy bitsy tiny weeny bit. The Lotus Esprit is a brilliant looking car. It's a typical 70s wedge supercar, and it looks very nice. The Series 1 Esprit had a 2 litre inline-4 and a 5-speed manual transmission from a Citroën and a Maserati. The Esprit S1 was praised for its handling and is said to have the best steering of any Esprit. Lotus said the car could go from 0 to 60 in 6.8 seconds and had a top speed of 138 miles per hour. However, this was a tiny bit optimistic. Tests said the car went from 0 to 60 in 8 seconds and had a top speed of 133 miles per hour. The Lotus Esprit went through 4 different series throughout its life, and production finally ended in 2004. 1977, Elvis Presley died. Star Wars came out. The Porsche 928 was released. However, that is not my pick for this year. That crown goes to the Aston Martin V8 Vantage. The V8 Vantage is amazing. It has fantastic straight line speed. It went from 0 to 60 in 5.3 seconds, faster just than the Ferrari Daytona. The first series had 390 brake horsepower and 406 pound-feet of torque at a top speed of 170 miles per hour. Aston Martin also built a convertible version from 86 to 89 called the Vantage Volante. The V8 Vantage has a very aggressive and muscly looks. That, combined with its performance numbers, gives it the nickname the British Muscle Car. 534 V8 Vantages were produced by the time production ended in 1989. My favourite car of 1978 is the BMW M1. The M1 was built by BMW's Motorsport division as a homologation model. The M1 is another wedge supercar, and I personally do quite like its looks. The M1 has a 3.5 litre inline six producing 273 horsepower and 243 pound-feet of torque. The road version has a top speed of 162 miles per hour. The M1 is one of BMW's rarest models, with only 453 production models ever built. The car placed 10th in a list of the top sports cars of the 1970s, compiled in 2004 by Sports Car International. The final year of the 70s, 1979, Margaret Thatcher was elected. Take of that as you will, I'm not here to be political. And, well, to be honest, not much happened to cars. It was pretty boring. So I resorted, giving the crown of my favourite car of 1979 to a van. The Volkswagen Transporter Type 3, or Type 25, or Caravelle, or Minibus, or whatever other bloody names it had. The T3 was the first transporter with a water-cooled engine, and the last transporter with an air-cooled engine. Engine sizes ranged from 1.6 litres to 2.6 litres. Volkswagen offered a massive amount of body styles. You could get pickup trucks, panel vans, window vans, minibuses, camper vans. If you needed a job doing, Volkswagen most likely had the van for you. And if they didn't, could have just gone to Ford and get a Transit. Nowadays, T3 owners occasionally like to swap their old VW engine out for something a little more fast. Subaru flat 6s are popular, along with Porsche 911 engines and motors from Golfs, Jettas and Audis. Also, if you've ever watched the old Top Gear where they crossed the channel in amphibious cars, well, Richard's car was based on a T3. And yes, it did break down, have a steering failure and sink, but it's still a T3. I would say if I was to buy a transporter, I would definitely get the T3, as it is a classic, but it has more modern amenities such as climate control, power steering, power doors and electric mirrors. The T3 was replaced by the T4 in 1990, however, it was produced in South Africa until 2002. The last ever T3 which was produced was painted gold and was destroyed in a rollover accident. Anyway, that is it from me from this video. If you did enjoy it, please do go down below and leave a like while you're down there. Subscribe if you haven't done so already. And I really do hope to see you in my next video. See you later. Goodbye.